This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by corporate board member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. I'm TK Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and we are coming to you today remotely from the West Coast Boardroom Summit here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and that's why you see behind us the empty chairs. You'll see people milling around, but it's certainly a great opportunity to have some great guests, and today is no exception. I have the opportunity to welcome Odell Owens, who is the director with U.S. Bank and is chairman of the Community Reinvestment and Public Policy Committee. Welcome, Odell.
Thank you.
And it's public policy that really we want to talk about. But first of all, just to make sure that the audience knows, the community reinvestment part is not unusual for a bank. And, Congress had mandated certain things that would happen in reinvestment. Banks were supposed to be active in this space. Right. So it's not unusual to see this committee on a financial institution. But the public policy part is something that is more common among all. So talk a little bit about your public policy committee.
Well, as you said, our committee started out as the Community Reinvestment Act, and it was a very important committee because this is the committee that reported out the fair lending, where the government could come in actually and evaluate how we were lending to low, moderate income borrowers as well as low, moderate income areas. And that used to be a very important statistic. I can recall when that was front page for the Cincinnati Enquirer, comparing all the banks, because that was the only way the average person could look at a bank and say, are you fair in your lending? As time has gone on, this committee has become the repository for other kind of responsibilities for the bank, and certainly, as you said, public policy. Banking and the financing industry has changed, that the bank needed a committee which they could run certain things through. Part of it was our sustainability. Part of it was reporting out, at least to the bank board, how the PACs of the bank were spending the money and who they were supporting.
Well, the political contributions is one of those things that's going to make at least people consider public policy committees, because activists have certainly taken a role. Congress again passes something, all of a sudden now you can make contributions to political campaigns. Everybody was up in arms. They want to know who, as shareholders, they want to know where our money is being spent and for what purposes. So how have you guys at U.S. Bank sort of addressed that issue? And is it the type of issue in your mind that should be transparent? Or is this something that companies maybe want to put a stake in the ground and say, listen, certain things make sense to be transparent, say on pay, certainly we're past that, but there's other things that maybe shouldn't be transparent? Well,
I think things certainly evolved. When you look at the political contributions, if they're coming from the PAC, that's not coming from shareholders' money. That's coming from a PAC. I think that's a different route. Certainly the bank, being a financial institution, has to support the organizations that speak for banks. So that is a political contribution to have a lobbyist in Washington. That's fine. I don't have a problem saying we support the American Bankers Association, because they're going to look out for us, which indeed we feel will give shareholder value. Everything that we do at U.S. Bank is really towards increasing shareholder value. Also, I think being a bank, as you know, being a former banker, we're conservative. We're not going to be the first ones out of the corral. We really have to look and see the lay of the land, let the other companies come out first, so that we can learn from their mistakes as well as choose best practices.
One of the other things in your charter that is probably a task that you take on is sustainability. That can take sort of different definitions. It can be carbon footprints. It can also be the future of the organization, making sure you're sustaining that longevity. How do you guys deal with that in the definition of your charter?
Probably in our charter, it's more sustainability in terms of green issues or the environment. You know, being a bank, we first, again, as we said, we want to focus on shareholder value. We want to lower our own carbon print. And by lowering our carbon print, actually, it adds to the bottom line. When you look at those clients that stated, we rather have all our statements by email. We've saved thousands of papers, envelopes, and trees. At the same time, it's been cheaper, again, positive to the bottom line. Overall, anything that we can do to increase shareholder value is going to sustain the company. Through our committee, through our public policy, we get to share all the good news that U.S. Bank is doing, all the great things they do in the community. Most recently, U.S. Bank was awarded the highest award from United Way, a sort of a national award. Well, those are kind of things that there are certain clients that we feel, or shareholder investors, who want to invest in a company that's tied to the community.
Well, U.S. Bank has always been on the front end of diversity and all those issues. I really tip my hat. Your CEO.
Richard David is great. He is the best CEO.
Yeah. We'll pass that on as a.
But no one can steal him. Yeah. No one can steal him. He is the best.
As we close up here, let me ask you a key question. So, we've been through a rough economy. You've been at a bank. You've certainly experienced what has happened on that side. We're coming out, you know, we're managing through the whole process. But when you sit back with your experience as a director and look at what we've been through, and you look at what's happening now with the transparency and the say and pay, what concerns you about the future of the boardroom, meaning on that? And then at the same time, for what we would have been through, what encourages you when you look forward?
Well, I think first we got to be careful that we simply do not just manage through proxy. I think a board should ensure on the front end. I think you always finish where you start. On the front end, bring in good directors. Do your metrics of your board to ensure that every aspect that you think you may want to draw in terms of expertise is reflected by your board. I think you start there first. Certainly, I think you do have to listen to your investors and your stockholders and get their input, but I think you got to, in the end, make the best decision. People have said all the time that if you don't understand the business of a company, you're not going to be a very good director. By the same token, many investors don't really know the business of banking and all its complexities. So therefore, we have to do our fiduciary responsibility and make decisions that we think are best for the bank. You know, I think when you talk about the other end, in life, everything's a pendulum. Things swing one way, then they're going to swing back. You got to ride the tide, but you ride the tide by focusing on the business core. You know, as long as we're providing shareholder value, who's going to come and then that means we're doing the right kinds of things then, and we can sustain any inquiry.
Well, that's a very good outlook on what we all have to face on day to day. And if our cheering in the background here is any indication of this conference, people will know that this is a lively event, even though we've tried to sequester ourselves
Absolutely.
Here on that. So, Odell, thank you again for joining us. That will conclude this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. We invite you back next week, where we're again going to be doing a remote, and we think you'll find it interesting and certainly a way for you to become a better director and a better committee member. So we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by corporate board member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.